Hello and welcome to School Health Presents Holistic Transitioning. I'm Dr. Ray Hype, and this week we're going to be looking at a topic that whether you're a teacher, you're a therapist, you're a parent, or anyone else preparing to have exceptional individuals come back into a classroom or back into a workplace, we're going to be focused on skills that actually should be presented in those very early stages of coming back, and even in the home environment right now, begin to be practiced to make for an easier transition down the road. One of the things that I have been engaged with in various discussions, whether it be with BCBAs, whether it be with psychologists or counselors, or even just special education departments, is the idea of our classrooms will be different. How do we make sure that transition is not something as shocking and sudden as the transition had to be back in March? Well, there are some things we can be doing right now to actually prepare some of those skills, and there are some things that we can be doing down the road in preparation for those first few days. So we want to start with something very basic and very simple, which can be done at home. And that's the whole idea of healthy skills. What are those skills that we need to be aware of? First and foremost, washing hands. You've heard me say this on multiple videos. You've seen it no matter where you're looking. Washing hands is of the utmost importance. And it is. But the critical piece for many of our exceptional individuals, especially for some of those that do have various types of sensory issues, is the fact that we've got to have them understand that you need to be rubbing the hands together and getting in between the fingers and doing it with soap in water for at least 20 seconds. So there's obviously several different things we can be doing along this route. One of the things that we can be doing is, again, introducing any type of a timer. So whether you're looking at an hourglass type of timer, or you're looking at a basic cooking timer that you may have around the stove, or for those of you in the classrooms and that, looking at something like a time timer. I love this one. This is a 5-minute timer. It makes it very easy to get things a little more precise for our kids. Those are the things we can start doing right now and having right there for them so that they understand what that 20 seconds looks like and begins to feel like. Because again, what we're trying to do is acclimate them physiologically to that whole idea of washing hands. And so within that context, we want to start now. We want to make sure that they're washing hands, but that the idea of when to wash hands is also reinforced. It's not just a transition piece. We're done with this activity. We got our hands dirty. Maybe we had someone working with us in a hand over hand type of format, so we need to wash hands. We also need to have them understand that's not just something that you do after you go to the bathroom too. We know that we always have to wash hands then, but there are other times we have to wash hands. When else? When we sneeze, if we're sneezing down into our hands, if we're not wearing a mask at that point, or even if we are wearing a mask and then touch that mask. We want to make sure we wash our hands before we're touching our face or our eyes. We want to make sure that for some of our individuals who may be relying on putting their hands up near their face or near their mouth, do have their hands consistently washed. So we want to start that process right now. It's a healthy skill, but at the same time, what we can be doing too is getting the ideas in of when this is most essential. When water is not available, we also want to be talking and working with those individuals on various types of hand sanitizer. Again, if you've got an individual that tends to go to their mouth a lot, you want to be cautious about alcohol-based hand sanitizers. You want to take a look at something more like a Safe Hands or even a TheraWorks. I love TheraWorks because you can put it all over your face. We're seeing a lot of athletic programs even adopting it because it provides a strong barrier towards that virus and so many other viruses too along the way. So take a look at some of the other things out there, but hand washing is going to be, and hand sanitizing are two very important factors as we go in. Along with that is the whole idea of practice putting on a mask. We've got Lamekins here with her mask on right now. We want to make sure that they begin to be comfortable with that mask. And again, use that timer around the house so that we're timing out how long that mask is on. Make sure you've got the right type of mask. You've seen some of our other videos about things like clear masks, especially when you're dealing with individuals that don't understand that when this is covered up, sound can still come out, and that's okay. You want to also make sure that as an instructor or a therapist, you're using a clear mask if you've got individuals who are deaf or hard of hearing. You also want to make sure as an SLP, you're using a clear mask and they may be using a clear mask too, so that you can communicate effective strategies using the mouth and how the mouth works along with whatever therapies you're presenting on that day. So mask practice is going to be important. Some of you may be using face shields. Again, that practice of having it on. You know, it's always very interesting to me to read some of the commentaries that are out there that aren't necessarily research-based. It's just someone saying, hey, this is a cool thing. I saw it on Facebook and I tried it and I love it. The fact is, with those face shields, they can be very comfortable for some of our kids. However, they have to be able to have something on like a headband or a cap. That's the type of sensation that will give. And for some of our individuals, it doesn't work either. So we want to make sure we've got the right thing. But the practice of having it on, practice of using gloves, the practice of asking for it in the morning, the practice of putting it on by themselves. Why? Because these are skills that they may need at different points in time down the road. And when I say down the road, maybe even just a few weeks into the school year, maybe before going out of the house, they put their own mask on. So these are some things that we want to practice. We also want to practice with gloves. There'll be some circumstances where they may need to wear gloves depending on the environment they're going into, or perhaps a gown. So again, some practice sessions with that. Make sure the practice sessions are timed. We don't want to overwhelm them. We're trying to make sure that these are skills that are easily transferable to the rest of their lives then. They may still need to wear masks at different points in times during their lives. We know of certain countries they may travel to where the pollution is so high. We know that there are some of our kids that, as they're even going out in fall or spring times, may have certain types of allergies where a mask would be helpful. And so that's what we want to really promote here, that these things can be used properly in multiple settings along the way. So that practice is also important. So we've got hand washing, those healthy skills, the practice of other things that go along with that, like putting on masks, putting on face shields, being able to put on gloves or a gown and use them for sets of time. That's an important thing. As we move through that though, we also want to make sure we're working with them to understand some of the markings they're going to see. Ironically, if we go out into certain stores, whether it be grocery stores or department stores, we oftentimes are now seeing that there are certain aisles that you're meant to go one way, or they've got a dual arrow saying that this is an aisle you can go both ways. What is amazing to me is to actually be in some of these scenarios and watch the amount of people that go not only the wrong way on one aisle. Guess what? We all run into that from time to time. We're not thinking about where our context is. But to watch some of these people actually go the wrong way down the aisles, I don't know if they're doing it on purpose or it's just the way that they started their shopping experience. But it's like, folks, there's a reason that we've been asked to do this. Just follow along and paint a good example for our exceptional individuals and our children along the way. But what do those signs mean? What does it mean when you've got the little circle and a line going through it? Well, it means don't go that way. What about an arrow? Which way should I go? Follow the arrow. The pointy way says that's the way we need to go. We also have things, again, that you could be putting down like hands and feet. And again, many of you have seen my vinyl hands and feet from time to time and realize that they can be great things to put down. You can make your own, just cutting them out of paper and cold laminating them to have them lasting for a while. I like having these because, especially now in this day and age, having the hands down, we let our students know where they can be touching or where they can be resting. Having feet down, It allows them to know where they need to stand. Where they need to stand, perhaps if they're getting something like a vision assessment, or where they need to stand at the front of the classroom as they're being invited in to go to their specific area. And I know that some of you right now are looking at, okay, how do we make sure social distancing goes into our classrooms? A couple of different ways to do it. One of the ways that can start at home right now and is easily transferred into the classroom. At home, if you have some painter's tape, you can actually put painter's tape down in different areas, even areas on the carpet. Don't use regular masking tape, and definitely don't use duct tape on carpets. That'll rip the carpets up. But painter's tape has a lighter amount of backing, adhesive backing on it. And that's so that you can easily pull it off a wall and it's not going to pull the paint with it. So look at something like that, that's very light tack on the back, that you can actually set some areas up at home. At school, you want to make a couple of decisions. The first decision is, if you're going to be putting tape down, make sure you're getting good floor tape. You don't, again, necessarily want to go out and just get duct tape because it's available at the Home Depot or the Lowe's. Duct tape still will leave a residue on the floor. Floor tape is made for floors. It's made for, we've seen it a lot in gymnasiums, so you may have some lying around. I've got wider painter's tape here just because that's what I have around the house. However, when you're looking at things, as long as you've got a 2-inch roll of tape, that's going to actually allow us to have a squared off area that can be protected then. Get a very small, simple tape measure. Use that as you're making your markings along the way. Cut out some arrows, or even use your tape to design arrows, and have paths going back and forth. And begin working with those exceptional individuals as to what those mean. Because guess what? In the long run, arrows going in a certain way, like a one-way sign, are going to be helpful for our individuals to understand as they move on. A circle with a slash through it means don't do this, don't go in there. That's going to be helpful to understand. So again, turn this into a learning experience with these markings. What do the markings mean, and how do we carry this on to make sure this is something that will last well beyond the academic years? As we're working with that too, recognize that we are practicing following directions. Why? Because for some of our exceptional individuals, they may get so excited they're not even paying attention to the directions as they're going in. And we have to be cautious, because if that's the case, they go some new place and they're so excited, we don't want them running off and potentially putting themselves in harm's way. So we're working again with following directions. Make sure the directions are given in ways that they can understand. So many times we just assume auditory directions are going to work. Using things like markers are also good visual directions as they're going in. Have tactile directions too. So you might have the hands down or the feet down, and that's where they need to stop. So those are some things that you want to build in along the way when it comes to following directions. Finally, start working on skills that surround the technology and social skills. How do you act when you're on a Zoom meeting or a Google Classroom, Google Hangouts meeting? What are some of the things you should be doing? How are you interacting when it's more a one-on-one call? You're with a therapist, you're with a teacher. Another thing that we want to be working on, because again, this all ties together in the long run, because some of our individuals will be making video calls later on to their friends or their family, and some of our individuals will be actually moving out into a workforce, and they may be in a situation where they're having Zoom meetings or they're having other meetings, and we want them to understand the basic protocols without trying to assume that, hey, you're going to get it. But we also want to make sure we are then giving them the idea and the support they know that even though we, as teacher, as administrator, as therapist, as whomever is not there at that time, we're still there live with them, and at some point in time we'll be back together with them. So it becomes more of a transition feature as we go on. How are they transitioning from just that video side of things into the physical side and back and forth? Because we may see more of that as we go through the context of this academic year. The other thing and other reason that I'm putting this out there now is, again, this whole idea of duration. We recognize the fact that if an individual, and this is any individual, including adults, we put a game in front of them that they're very interested in, or a book in front of them that they're very interested in, what happens? You lose time. All of a sudden, you're 2-3 hours in. For some of our exceptional individuals, again, that game may draw them in, but an interaction like this, they're done in a minute or two. So what we want to be able to do is begin with, again, shorter durations and get them used to, hey, how things might work down the road when we're doing any type of hybrid support or we're doing any type of remote support too along the way. Because the whole idea of remote support can actually add a depth and dimension to our students that we just haven't thought of doing in the past. So these are some skills early on that we want to make sure that we incorporate into what's happening and understand that these will be things that, if we're thinking ahead, really do tie into those individuals' lives throughout the rest of their life. And still, these schools of thought focus in on how these skills are being used on a day-to-day basis for their own health and well-being. So these are some tips that we've got. Thank you for so many of you who sent in some of your suggestions as to what you're doing. I know a couple of you are going, hey, wait a minute, I was talking about that, and you're absolutely right, you were. And so that's what we want to do, keep sharing the good ideas that we have and make sure that we create our next school year to be the strongest school year we've ever had. Thank you so much for all that you're doing. And if you have any questions or want to reach out to me, it's rheipp@schoolhealth.com. Thank you, and we'll see you soon.